Hey everybody! Today we see many adolescent temper tantrums. Captain Picard starts feeling uncomfortable, and we ask the question, if there are no refrigerators in the 24th century, where do you hang up your kids' artwork? The answer to that and more, coming up.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today, we are talking about Season 1, Episode 10, entitled Haven. Shereese, this episode is written by Lan O'Kun and Tracy Torme and directed by Richard Compton, and the star date kicking off is 4/12/94.5. I don't know about you, but this episode just bothers me.
I know. This is when we get introduced to Andrea's arch enemy, Lwaxana Troi. So, Andrea, why don't you give us a rundown of the show? We'll do our highlight overview, and then we will dive into this episode.
Sounds perfect. So, the plot summary for Haven is, the Enterprise arrives at the planet Haven, where Counselor Troi has been summoned by her mother, Lwaxana. Troi has previously been set into an arranged marriage to Wyatt Miller, a young human doctor. Troi and Wyatt attempt to get to know each other, but find it difficult as Troi is still in love with Commander Riker. Wyatt has had numerous dreams of another woman with whom he's fallen in love and had initially believed to be Troi communicating telepathically with him. But it's not. Womp womp. Sorry, Wyatt.
Yeah.
All right. So we kind of kick off the episode where they're approaching this planet Haven, which has like mythological like properties apparently of like healing the sick and kind of rejuvenating and restoring. And this package is beamed aboard the Enterprise, and it's like this silver box with a face in it.
Yeah, it's like a chest, like a personalized chest.
Yes. Yeah, very personalized because it has a freaking face in it. Yeah.
Yep.
So Troi, I think it's really funny that Tasha Yar is like in charge of bringing it on board, and Riker is like, okay, let's see what it is. But then Deanna Troi just sort of wanders in and she goes, hey guys, what's going on? Like, do you just
I thought the same thing. That was kind of random. No one called you, girl. But if she hadn't walked in, we would still be confused about this face chest.
That is true. That is
true. So
the
face chest pops up. And Troi is like, hey guys, how's it going? What's going on in the transporter room today? And then suddenly the face comes to life and now it's a real face. And it's like, this is a message for Deanna Troi. And it's like, what just happened?
Yes. It's like, it's a little bit perfect timing that she walked in. I just kind of picture her wandering in, like when she's bored, to different rooms being like, hey guys, anything going on here? No? All right, I'll go to transporter room 4 then.
I mean, that's kind of
what's going on
how
in here.
Life goes though, right? Like if you work in an office, if any of you guys work in an office, there are times when you are just hating sitting at your desk and you're like, I need a change of scenery. And you just walk around. You just walk from desk to desk. Hey, what's going on over here? Talking on the phone, huh?
That's true.
Got it. What about you? Eating a snack? Love those snacks. And you're just like, bored wandering. So I can imagine that on the Enterprise, that could happen from time to time.
I guess you're right. I could totally see that.
Still a little weird.
But yeah, she was just like, hey guys, what's going on in here? So when the chest announces this like joyous news, and then busts open full of gems, which I thought was kind of funny. It just sort of spilled out like all over. Like
it was like a piñata. It was awesome.
You're not worried about losing some like priceless gems like in the crack of the floor or something. It's just like
I don't think their floors have cracks. So there's that.
I guess that's true. These are not issues we have to worry about at all
in the 24th century. No. Nope. Right. Floor cracks, forget about it.
So it turns out that Deanna Troi is getting married, and she is none too pleased about it. At all.
Right. It's so they close up into her face, because they're like, oh, we're so happy about this, wedding or whatever. And Riker's like, whose wedding? Who's getting married? And then it zooms into Troy's face and she's like, I am. And she's got tears in her eyes. Like Marina Sirtis, mad props to you. I don't know how you really call up those tears on command or if they put some eye drops in before the scene. I don't know.
Right.
But like she looked like devastated and her eyes were all misty. And I was like, if she cries one more time, I swear. But she didn't. She got teary, but she didn't cry. I was like, all right. She held it together.
The girl knows how to cry. I feel like if Marina Sirtis has to like audition for another role in in some
Mhm.
other television show or movie. And they're like, can you cry on command? She's like, allow me to show you season 1 of Star Trek TNG.
Yes, evidence A. Right. I've
Like,
actually seen her in other shows, and she's like she's often portrayed as this really actually tough lady, like a pretty tough,
mm.
like government agent or something like that. And
Oh,
I'm
I could
like,
see that.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, I could totally see that. And man, I almost wish she wasn't so famous in Star Trek so we could have had the pleasure of seeing her in that role more,
Yeah.
because everybody coming out of Star Trek was so super famous from the show
Yeah.
that it
Yes.
was like impossible to cast them without
Yeah.
people just going, oh, look, it's just Geordie LaForge or something.
Yeah.
Although I
Yeah.
guess he did do a couple things, but like after Star Trek, like you couldn't get Riker on a show, right?
And I feel like that is the double-edged sword of being on a hit show like that, because you become typecast in your role. Like in watching like Independence Day when it first came out, I was like, hey, Data. That's what I thought.
That's hilarious.
Even though like he had this like completely different, he was like a nervous Nelly sort of scientist and kind of excitable. But I was like, it's Data with scraggly long ass hair. Like
And glasses.
yeah. Oh, and also Riker too. Well, not Riker, but Jonathan Frakes. He ended up going, I think, pretty big into directing. So he actually has directed a handful of Star Trek episodes, and I think one of the Star Trek movies. I think he directed Nemesis, maybe. Don't quote me on that, but I think.
Well, actually, a lot of the actors went on to be directors. So, in listening to the podcast called The Delta Flyers, which is a podcast by two of the former cast members of Voyager, they talk about how LeVar Burton and Jonathan Frakes and different people from TNG would come and direct their episodes.
Oh, that is cool. See, I did not know that. I didn't know
that either.
I didn't get super duper into Voyager. Like I remember enjoying it, but I don't know. I just like for me, TNG was like kind of just hit that like nostalgic button.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I'm just saying that like, yeah, they all kind of had the opportunity to get into directing throughout the seasons of because some of them, directed episodes of TNG itself.
Yeah.
And then they went on to direct other things. And Jonathan Frakes actually directed Picard, which has
so rad.
Come out this year, and it's pretty freaking good. And I was impressed.
Right. Actually,
talent.
Speaking of Jonathan Frakes, I just saw on Instagram a couple of days ago, he did a little video where he talked about his experience auditioning for the role of Commander Riker and how he had to audition 7 times. And at one point, Gene Roddenberry invited him into his office and was like, look, I want you to kind of get the gist of like what life is going to be like in the 24th century. And he's like, there's no hunger, there's no racism, there's no sexism. Every child knows how to read. And he kind of put that out there as like, let's keep striving towards that in the midst of all of the like social upheaval that we're experiencing right now, and people protesting and fighting for like equal rights with like Black lives and all that. And I thought that was actually really cool.
Yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So speaking of Riker, though, he is none too pleased that Deanna's getting married. This is like
right. Suddenly he's jealous, which kind of surprised me, because if we think back to episode 1, Encounter at Farpoint, Troy's all like, it's you. And he's like, it's you. And she's like, hey, Riker, do you want to go into the bottom of this moon jelly and just, this space moon jelly and just kind of like rekindle the old flame? And he's like, no, you can do your own thing. Like he's so quick to just kind of shove her aside. And in this episode, suddenly he's like, you can't get married, but I love you.
Well, this is, I think, classic ex-boyfriend move right here. Or just ex anything move, because girlfriends do this too. But it's like, I don't want to be with you, but I don't want you to be with anybody else.
Exactly. Nailed it.
Riker, you are being such an ex right now. Although I think that this episode is definitely not my favorite, because I really don't like Lwaxana Troi, and I'll get into that in a minute. But it does show good character development. Like we get to see some background information, and we learn a little bit more about like Troi and where she came from. We dig a little deeper into Riker and his feelings. He's not just such a robot. So I did think that it was good for that. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. But she does call him Bill again. Did you notice?
She calls him Bill multiple times in this episode. And I'm like, that is so weird. And then at the very end, she calls him Will. And I was like, what is going on? If it wasn't for the TNG Bible, which again, you guys can get that kind of director's guide through going to our website at the tngpodcast.com. But in there, Gene Roddenberry wrote what he thought the characters should be, what their backstory should be, and all that sort of thing. And one of the things he specifically wrote about Will Riker was that his good friends call him Bill. And when I read that, I was like, nobody calls him Bill. That never happened. And as I'm rewatching season 1, I'm like, wow, Troy calls him Bill like multiple times throughout season 1 so far. And eventually, thankfully, that nickname just goes away because it just, I don't love it. I don't love it for Will because I'm so used to Will.
Yes, I know. I don't like it either. And I like, yeah, he's Will Riker. But yeah, she goes, Bill, tell me what you're feeling or whatever, she says. And I went, son of a bitch, she said Bill. Like, I was like, I got you, Troy. Like, you said it. But yeah, he's definitely not psyched, but I wish he would just come out and say it. Like, he's just pouting. And like, I get it's hard to say that, but like, come on, she's hurting, she's crying, she's sad, you're hurting, you're sad. Just say it. Just say like, I don't like, I'm sad that you're getting married because I still have feelings for you, Imzadi, or some crap like that. Like, just say it.
Yeah, just freaking say it. Don't pout. Don't have a big tantrum. This actually, I wrote down in my notes, this was the episode of the tantrum. We got to see a lot of good tantrums going on in this episode.
Yes.
But let's take a step back. So Wyatt arrives on the ship and he's just looking as cute as he wants to be. I think he was just super adorable.
Oh my God, right?
He looks like a Prince Charming. But my immediate thought was the actor, Robert Nieper, I think is how you say his last name. This actor, what I remember him from was this show called Prison Break, where he played this psychotic serial killer. And this character was so crazy. He was like the bad guy you love to hate on the show. And that show was really amazing too. Like, it really pulls in your heartstrings.
It was really good. I don't remember him at all from that. I just remember,
oh my gosh,
Wentworth Miller and his crazy hot eyes. That's all I remember. And his ridiculous
future husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was a really, really big character on the show throughout every single season. He was this psychotic serial killer, crazed inmate. I mean, every time you saw him, you were just like, did not know what he was going to do next, who he was going to kill, kidnap, rape, whatever. And so seeing him like 20 years earlier or something in TNG as a sweet, smooth-faced man boy was really kind of
feathered hair to the heavens.
It was a little shocking because I'm like, but that guy's a killer. But no, he was so sweet. He was so sweet. He was definitely like a Prince Charming.
Yeah, he was. He was very sweet. And we don't know that he's disappointed when he meets Deanna until she says, like, I'm definitely something of a surprise to him. Like, I'm not what he was expecting. And then, of course, we find out later on that he's been dreaming about this other blonde lady, but he's just so sweet to her. And he brings her that ridiculously cheesy, like $1 plastic rose.
Yeah, the chameleon rose. I want a chameleon rose.
I know.
And I was a little disappointed though. Like, when he first handed it to her, it changed colors.
Yes.
I was a little disappointed that it didn't continue to change colors throughout the episode.
I know.
That's what I kind of wanted, because I was like, surely she's feeling different emotions when she's talking to her mom and she's getting all upset versus when she meets Wright. Right.
It turns like
when
blood
Riker's
red.
pouting. Yeah. Like, I just wanted, the color didn't even matter. I just wanted to see it be, orange, purple, pink as her emotions were changing. But
you're right.
That was kind of a one-trick pony. He handed it to her, it turned white, and then she had to carry it around for the next several scenes, and that's all. So that was a little bit of a letdown, but that was a cool idea.
That does remind me of a episode of The Office dinner party when Andy and Angela like show up to the dinner party, and Andy's got that bouquet of flowers, and he like rips one flower out and gives it to Angela. And she's such a bitch. She's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, she's got to like hold it. Like, it's so great. So every once in a while, like if my husband and I are walking our dog, he'll grab a flower for me and I go, what am I supposed to do with this? Which of course I'm tickled anytime he gives me a flower. I'm like, oh, cute. But yeah, so now I give him like the stern bitchy face.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel like.
Angela.
Yes, that's what I feel like Troy was doing. She was pulling an Angela, but very, very graciously. She's like, I guess I'll just carry this thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So when Wyatt Miller and family beam aboard, I had this moment where I was so loving the costume that Mrs. Miller was wearing. Mm-hmm. She was wearing this kind of like lavender, smoky purple, like kind of a wrappy shawl thing, mm-hmm. and this like really cool feathered hat or like mm-hmm. structural hat. And I'm such a hat like, I love hats.
Yeah.
I love them so much. So I had like a fangirl moment over that because I was like, oh my God, I wish I could make something like that. It was so beautiful. Like that woman was like elegant from beginning to end, which is hard to get because again, this was 1987. Like nothing from the 80s looked elegant. I tell you, it was all padded shoulders and a bunch of bullshit. Like,
oh yeah,
she looked great.
These outfits were really great in this episode. Like the Miller family's outfits were very nice. And even Loxana always has really cool clothes though. She always has something really pretty.
She had the like back revealing. She did. So she beams on board, which we find out she didn't want to beam on board until the Millers were like
vacated the area.
It was like the Selle and the Antikins all over again.
It was exactly like that. We were just waiting for her to sniff the air. Yeah.
So my arch nemesis, Loxana Troy, beams aboard. With her assistant, her valet, Mr. Holm, who I love.
Yes.
He's great. He's great.
Yes. And Mr. Holm, as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Lurch. That's the same actor who played Lurch in the 90s versions of the Addams Family.
Well, the man knows how to silently act.
He really does. He's good at it. I looked this up yesterday because I was like, you know, people who have that particular stature and look play a very particular role, like over and over and over. They play a Lurch, right? Because even Mr. Holm is really Lurch with some paint on his face. It's the same character. And even Lurch, I think, had paint on his face. It's the same character.
You're right.
And I was like, man, when you have a certain stature, you definitely get typecast. You don't get to talk. You don't really get to act too much. And so as I was kind of looking into this guy, turns out this man is 7 feet tall.
What?
7 feet tall.
Get out.
He shows up as Loxana's valet for another 5 episodes. Well, I guess counting this one, right? 5 episodes of TNG where he keeps coming back to reprise this role, which I think is kind of fun.
That is really cool. And it's a fairly simple role. You just are walking around in the background or like handing her like combs or hair clips.
I actually think that Mr. Holm has a really fun character. He doesn't say anything, but he does so much. Yeah.
He is so funny. And he does actually say something where he says, thank you for the drinks.
He does at the end. Right.
And everybody's like, what? I didn't think you could speak.
Well, because in the beginning, Wyatt's dad is just like, you know, okay, so there's this scene where they're talking about the ceremony. And the Millers are saying Captain Picard should do the ceremony because he's the captain and that's what's appropriate. And then Loxana has a huge tantrum because this is the episode of the tantrums. And she's like, that is not okay. Absolutely unacceptable. It has to be a Betazoid wedding. And they're saying, no, it's going to be an Earth-like wedding. And so she's going on and saying Mr. Holm is the one who's going to perform the ceremony because he is versed in Betazoid traditions. And that's when Wyatt's dad says, but he doesn't even talk. And she says, but he speaks sign language and that's all we need for the ceremony. And that's when it's just like, oh my gosh, it's getting out of control. And Picard just throws the hammer and is like, you know, in the most diplomatic way possible. As the captain, I'm going to say that during this celebration, all conflicts are resolved at the end and everyone just stops talking. And I was like, man, if only it was that simple, teaching would be a lot easier.
Right.
As the teacher, I shall say all conflicts are resolved.
Done.
and then it's just over.
Fat chance of that ever happening.
Right. That's why we were thinking he doesn't talk because that was kind of established earlier and confirmed that, yes, he doesn't talk, but he does do sign language. And then all of a sudden he talks at the end, which is funny.
Yeah. And Loxana is played by Majel Barrett, who I talked about a bunch of times. She was Gene Roddenberry's wife. And she's also the voice of the ship's computer. So that's
which I do like. I do like the ship's computer voice. That's a good role for her.
She has a great voice for that. She really does. Like hearing that voice, it just feels like this is the computer. Like it's not like, oh, the computer has like a funny voice. It's like, no, that is the computer. And actually, Majel Barrett did a wonderful job at differentiating her tonality between being ship's computer voice and being Loxana Troy voice because
I couldn't tell.
Right. Even though I know that she plays the same, you know, it's the same person who plays those two roles. Unless you're like really straining, you really can't pick up the difference. Or it's very different. So she does a great job. I hate Loxana Troy. I hate her. I hate her.
Tell me why do you hate her?
She's so freaking pushy. She's so pushy. I hate that in people. And this is probably diving into my like childhood, but
the Andrea backstory.
I'm unpacking some, you know what? This is therapy right here. Loxana Troy is my mother. My mom is Loxana Troy. When she decides to do something, she's going to do it. Nobody's going to talk her out of it, no matter how ridiculous it is. But and that would be fine if she just would respect other people's wishes or opinions,
thoughts, choices,
anything,
actions.
anything. You could say like, hey, I'd really like to go eat at this restaurant. And she'd be like, great, we're going to go eat at that other one. I'm like, oh no, but I wanted to eat at this one. She's like, it's okay. And just to her, it like doesn't matter at all.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Loxana Troy, where she's like, everything is fine because I'm getting my way no matter what. And no matter who, doesn't matter who.
Doesn't matter who. Doesn't matter who. Yeah, I could see
that drives me crazy.
I could see how that would push on some of your childhood buttons for sure, because not only is she pushy, she's also telepathically pushy, which is like taking it to another level. She will literally get in your head just to be like, you're wrong and I'm right. And you're like, you can't even like plug your ears. You can't even, I mean, there's no escaping it. And that's why this is the episode of the tantrums, because you just see Troy like, mother. And she's just like, what? And the way she is with Captain Picard is it just makes me feel so uncomfortable. Right. And she's just, Picard, I see your thoughts about me. And he's just like,
downright pornographic. And poor Picard is like, let me get out of here.
Yeah. He's like, I'm not sure how to respond to this. Like, I don't. And then there's this funny scene at the very end where she when she's hopping off the ship and she makes this little statement about, I've never heard such thoughts about me like you have. And she kind of disappears. And Troy's like, that was meant to be a joke, Captain, from my mom, right? And he's just like, well, I was not amused, right? He's just like very not amused by Loxana Troy and her pushy, like, you must find me attractive. Even that's kind of pushy, the way she does that.
Well, and I think too that I firmly believe, and I feel like the audience members, we all sort of get like, many of these people are not finding her attractive, but
right.
She
way.
No, she says that to like make herself feel attractive. And I understand that. Like, I can get that, especially when you start getting to like a certain age, you feel like you're not like as young and virile and like you're not 21 anymore or whatever. Like, I get that. But to put that on someone else and make them feel uncomfortable, that's just shitty.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about this character? I'm sure there are some people on Team Loxana, because there are, you got every kind in the world. There's some people out there who probably love this character. But what's interesting is that the way that they wrote this character was in such a way that they made everyone else on the ship, everyone else in the cast kind of hate this character.
Right.
So as an audience member, you almost feel obligated to hate her as well. I mean, you, Andrea, have some special childhood buttons that she pushes. So like you wouldn't like her either way. But like for me, I noticed the way, everybody treats her and looks at her and reacts to her. And that's my reaction. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't like her either.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, is this some kind of subconscious message that Gene Roddenberry is putting out into the world, where he creates a role for his wife, and this role she's playing is a role where everyone in the world hates her.
So unlikable. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. What are you trying to say?
That's weird.
What are you trying to say? Although, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
Like I was saying, I'm a big fan of The Office, and Angela Kinsey plays Angela Martin, and the actress could not be more different than the character she plays. So it could be that same kind of thing where Majel Barrett could not be couldn't be more likable and just lovely and gracious. And then you have this like nails on a chalkboard character that you play. I think playing the opposite character to your personality is inherently fun. And actors routinely will say like, it's so much fun to play a baddie. And I could totally see that. All right. So at this point now, we are in Wyatt's quarters, and Deanna is going over there to kind of get to know him better. And a big part of me feels like, number one, there's a big problem with the plot here. Why is she agreeing to do this marriage? I mean, I understand that she's like, I'm a beta Z and that's what I have to do. But like, no, girl, you don't even know this guy. Like, you don't know him. You have a whole career. Why the F would you just be like, well, my parents said I had to marry this person? Like, that seems very not 24th century.
Well, and it's interesting because, I mean, that's her cultural traditions. And so she's committed to honoring her traditions, which I actually respect. And that's something that Picard says in his monologue at some point, where he's like, I think this is a backwards, outdated tradition. And not only that, but it's also, it interferes with like what we're trying to do here. It's inconvenient. Like, this tradition is inconvenient, and it's going to take our ship's counselor away and all this stuff. Right. And on the one hand, I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. Like, it's definitely inconvenient. It's inconvenient for Troy and everybody else. And like, no one saw this coming. And Troy thought that because she was on a starship, she didn't have to honor this agreement that made a long time ago. But at the same time, I think that other cultures, non-American cultures, still do practice arranged marriages. And I have friends who are married through arranged marriages that are happily married. I do. Yeah. I have some friends who are in different cultures that still practice that, and they are happily married to their spouse. And I've asked lots of questions because I'm an American and we don't do that. Right. And so I'm like, what was that like? And, all these questions. And it's like, you know what? One of my friends, she said, there's something beautiful about a community saying we all agree to this relationship. There's something kind of deep and familial about everyone coming together as a community and saying this relationship is good. We are all on board. We are all about it. Like, we support it.
I could see that.
And I was like, that's interesting. Because we are like, in America, we're like the opposite. We're like, I pick who I pick. If my family doesn't like it, oh well, and there's all kinds of drama and conflict and, whatever. And so I just think it's like it's just a different way to do love, a different way to do family, a different way to do community. So I kind of respect the fact that she's like, you know what? This is not what I expected. I hope that I would get out of it, but I'm going to honor and respect my family's traditions that I agreed to. I think that's hard to do in a community that's opposite of your cultural beliefs.
I think you're right about that. And honestly, I think that Wyatt seems to be just such a genuinely sweet guy and not bad looking and smart and blah,
and
blah,
like
blah.
That like charming. And a doctor,
she could,
come on.
She could definitely like do worse.
She could. And if it was like some slob who's like, 30 years older than her, who's like beats her and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah. Then
we wouldn't be happy with that, whether it was arranged or not.
No,
right. There'd be no scenario
not.
where we're like, oh, that's a good idea. Right. So
absolutely not. So we find out though that Wyatt is quite an artist and he's been doing a lot of drawings, but the drawings are all of one woman. And I tell you, this woman is like the dream 1980s woman right there.
Seriously, fierce.
Huge head of hair, feather. It's like Farrah Fawcett everywhere, like all sorts of Farrah Fawcett vibes. But I love that he's actually really straightforward with Troy. And he's like, yes, I've been dreaming about her like since I was a little boy. And I thought that like it was you. And because you're a betazoid, like I thought that you were just sort of like telepathically kind of reaching out to me. And I think it's very sweet and endearing that like he full on just like owned up to it.
Yeah.
And I think props to Troy to also be like, wow, gosh, I'm like, sorry that I'm not who you expected, but like, I hope that this still like kind of works well or whatever. She could have just been like, what?
Yeah. Let me tell you, girl, let me tell you how insecure I am. When I saw that, I was like, oh no, no, I'm not. I am not sharing your mind, your heart, or your bed with this mystery woman from your dreams. Like that would have not worked for me. Not that I would have said you have to choose or something. But
I think it's different though. If you're like in love, if you're in love with them, then you're like, no, I'm not sharing with you. Like that's a bunch of bullshit. But if you don't even know them at all, it's like, oh, okay, well, you have been drawing this girl. Okay.
I don't know how I would have reacted in that exact scenario because it's so bizarre. But yeah, that my
Super
first thought
bizarre.
was like, yeah, if I'm marrying this guy, I'm not sharing. I don't like to share. I'm super selfish when it comes to relationships.
I don't even like to share my burrito. Okay. Like never mind my man. Like
I'm not sharing your heart and your mind and your fantasy life and all of that. Nope. Come on. But so I think it was good that he owned up and even the way that he did it, where she was just like, wow, like, do you even know who she is? Or, how is that going to work? And he's just kind of like, it's just a boyhood fantasy, like I'll get over it. Basically, like I am disappointed, but this was my fantasy and I'll get over it. And actually, this is something you and I talked about offline, Andrea, about the way that Troy is able to have this like open love where she can love multiple people and it's not a conflict with anybody else. So of course she wouldn't think anything of it that he might love someone else as well. It's just kind of like, okay, and she even has this moment with Riker where she's just like, is the human heart too small for that? Like you can't do that. You can't have feelings for multiple people, but still be committed to one person at the same time. And I thought that's a really kind of interesting twist on this idea of open relationships, right? Because she's not saying we'll get married and we'll find this woman and bring her into our marriage. That's not what she's saying. No, but she's saying you can be in love with her and in love with me and we can be married and I can be in love with you and in love with Riker, but I can be committed to our relationship at the same time, which is like, what?
I see large shades of Gene Roddenberry's life in here. So Gene Roddenberry was it wasn't a secret. He was a big believer in open relationships. And so he had an open marriage with Majel Barrett. And like he just thought kind of in along that sort of swinging 60s mentality where it's like the heart is big enough to love like multiple people. And like and on paper that sounds lovely, but in real life I'm like, nope. That doesn't work.
The human heart's not
all.
that big, turns out.
Nope.
I actually have friends who practice open relationships, and my thing is like, if you're both cool with it, then that's good. But if one of you is not cool with it, then it's not cool. And then what I like about the way that this open relationship thing happens with Troy is that she stays committed to one person at a time, even if she's still even though she's still in love with Riker, she fully intends to marry Wyatt and live with Wyatt and leave the ship and go live her life with him. She's not like, I'll just sleep with both of you. Like, it's not like that. It's not have your cake and eat it too. She's like, I can love you and be committed, which I think is like an interesting little twist. So so she's super cool about it. She's just like, yep, you're in love with another woman in your dreams. Okay. Like, interesting.
I'll try to not be a disappointment, I guess. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. But so here, now we really hit sort of this, the subplot really starts to kick in where this mystery ship is approaching Haven. It is a super cool ship. It's got that like iridescent, like rainbowy kind of bubble around it. That is like one of the coolest ships. I wish we would have seen it more. And it turns out it's a Tyrellian ship, which what we know is the Tyrellian flu like wiped out basically the entire planet. And there are very few people left.
All the Tyrellians.
Yeah. And I love that like it was sort of there were turning these screws, like the writers were using this as like a cautionary tale for what we are kind of doing along like our own like human evolution, where they say that they chose like hatred over intelligence and they unleashed this biological weapon. And Dr. Crusher says they reached like what is the equivalent to like late 20th century human like Earth history or like Earth level of technology. So it became very easy to unleash this virus on the other group, whoever their warring other Tyrellians were. And then they also infected themselves. So now they all carry this like lethal infection. And the entire freaking planet died, and they like spread around to like other planets and killed those planets too. Like it's really bad. It's really bad.
Hashtag coronavirus.
Oh,
although this wasn't an attack on anybody. However, that same idea of a pandemic is echoed in this episode, but in the form of a biological attack. This wasn't just an accident or whatever. This was like, we're gonna get you, and then they got themselves, and of course they did.
Of course they did. Well, yeah, because the way that they said, like they chose hatred over intelligence, like it never prospers, you know, like that just never goes well. But the ship, because it appears to be like damaged, is moving so slowly. It's going to be like 10 hours before it gets to Haven. So they have time to sort of figure out what to do about it. Meanwhile, though, we have the pre-joining ceremony, which is kind of like, I guess, the rehearsal dinner.
Yeah, I think that would be it. The rehearsal dinner. Which was in some room we've never seen before and never see again, I think.
Nope, not ever. Not ever.
I don't recognize that room.
And I love that Data is so delighted by Lwaxana and Mrs. Miller's like bickering that it's like watching a tennis match. Like he's like kind of going back and forth.
It's awesome. It's so fun to watch. And there's this scene where in that dinner where Troy has the tantrum and she's just like, enough, mother, blah! You know, and she walks out and we've got Mr. Ohm over there banging on the little gongs, like giving thanks because he's drunk off his rocker. And Troy just walks over and throws it to the ground. And I was like, that's hilarious. Like that's ultimate tantrum moment right there when you start throwing crap. And then as she leaves and everyone's just kind of in stunned silence, Data's like, could you guys please continue your petty bickering? Because I find it very fascinating. And I was just like, oh, I love Data.
Wrote that down also.
I love Data.
So
and great. Give me back up a second. We missed this part, but I wanted to share this. So in our last episode, I think it was our last one for the battle, whenever we did that, we were complaining, our second to last one. We were complaining about the fact that we could not see inside of the ship with the Ferengi. They just had this green screen that was white and you couldn't see inside the ship, but then they had a scene inside the ship that was so cool. But then like, we don't see it when they're on the view screen. So what the heck? But here with Haven, you see this beautiful background. You totally see it in the view screen and it's so amazing. And then again, with the Tyrellian ship, you see everyone on the ship in the background. You see their bridge and it's just like, finally, here's where it happens. Way the heck in episode 9 that we're at. But now you can see
10,
10. You can see those in the background in the view screen. And I was just like so pleased with that. I mean, it just really rounds out the show. It's so lovely. It's so cool. It's like
Yeah,
one of
you're
those things you
right.
don't notice until it's gone. And then you're like, why the heck is there just a white screen and a super duper close up? That doesn't make any sense. So I loved the fact that they did that this time.
Right? You're right. Because when they do the Ferengi shots, it's just the Ferengi behind like a glowing white background. And it just looks so
weird
and cheesy. And yeah, this looks better because now you see like a bridge and yeah, that trailing ship is so cool too. I love it.
It was super cool.
Riker kind of makes up a very, very half-assed excuse that literally nobody believes and leaves the party. And then Troy says, I've had enough of this. And she knocks over the gong and she leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And then Troy finds Riker, honestly, dramatically as fuck, pouting on the holodeck.
He finds him full of angst, sitting on a rock.
Oh my God.
In the desert.
Sitting on a rock, like with one leg up and his like elbow around his one knee, kind of like, if you were to try as a teenager to post like a deep photo of you staring at the ocean and thinking deep thoughts, like that's the pose that you would do. Like it's so
they nailed the teenage angst right there.
Oh my God, yes. And she kind of calls him out on like, can't I love you and also be with Wyatt, but can't you still love me? But isn't the heart so small? Like it was
And also, I mean, she said earlier, like, you more than anything, you want to be a starship captain.
True.
And you've made it very clear that that takes precedence over any kind of relationship we might have. So this is your choice. This is the choice you've made. And he's just like, well, I don't have to like it, but it's true. He doesn't deny it. He's like, yeah, no, that's true. Like that's exactly the choice that I made. I would rather be a captain than be with you.
Yeah. And I do love that he kind of does the I don't have to like it because I'm like, dude, it's your choice. Like,
right. You don't have to like it. You could also make a different choice.
You could just change it if you don't like it. Like I could make scrambled eggs and be like, these are not that good and make something else. Like I'm not like, I don't have to like it. Like you made this choice, dummy. Like what are you talking about? Anyway, I think it's kind of funny that they're having this sort of like, they're kind of having it out in a way.
Yeah.
Angsty way. They're having it out.
Right.
And then Wyatt shows up and she's like, this is the man I was telling you about. And he's like, oh yeah, you want to be a starship captain, blah, blah, blah. And Riker's like, damn, she told you about me? Like,
I know. So, I mean, I love the honesty. I love Troy's honesty. I love Wyatt's honesty. Riker's the only one who's struggling here. Right? Because Troy's just like, this is the man I told you about that I was in love with. And Wyatt's like, oh, you're the man she was in love with. It cool.
Great to meet you.
Like, yeah, exactly. Great to meet you. And, good luck with that captain thing. Hope that works out for you. And he's just like,
and non-ironically too. He's like, I genuinely hope you like get what you like are like working towards.
I mean, he's super sweet.
He's a very sweet guy. We like Wyatt. We like him.
We do.
So I think it's funny that they had this kind of like emotionally tense moment and then Wyatt shows up, Riker leaves, and then Deanna immediately like kind of can switch gears and like be emotionally like vulnerable and sweet with Wyatt. And I was like, I don't know if I were you, if I were Troy and having like some deep, emotionally kind of gut-wrenching conversation with an ex that I was still in love with. And like the new guy I'm supposed to be with rocks up, I would not be like, oh, hey. I'd be like, I need a moment. Like I'm a little bit.
But that's the thing. That's exactly what she was saying is that her heart was big enough to, for them to both occupy the space at the same time. There was no switching of gears she had to do. She just was on. She was ready. So
yeah, I guess that's true. Okay. But now we have this like sort of crescendo moment where the Torellians finally get to visual range with the ship and they open the communication. Meanwhile, by the way, we haven't mentioned, down on Haven, they're freaking out because they're like, do not let them come down here. They're going to bring the plague. It's, they're going to like turn this whole beautiful planet into like a graveyard.
Yeah.
Which that is quarantine's a real thing for a reason because you can't be doing that. So they're trying to figure out, the Enterprise is trying to figure out what the Trellian ship is doing. And the Trellian ship opens the communications and oh my God, blonde girl's there in a hilariously like revealing outfit.
Yeah. And just the pinnacle of 80s fashion. I just watching that scene, it just was like every movie from the late 80s, early 90s that I loved just all came flooding back. Like
all of it.
Particularly this movie called Mannequin, which is like,
oh my God.
Yeah. Right. Where there's this mannequin who comes to life and she's this gorgeous woman, but then she like turns back into a mannequin in the day. And this guy who does set dressing is like trying to tell everybody she's real. And they're like, she's definitely a mannequin. And it's just, but she's like so gorgeous. She's just so beautiful. And that's what that reminded me of, that scene where she's just standing there. I was just like, it's Mannequin. It's just like this beautiful, iconic 80s look, immediately followed by her father pushing her to the side and saying, hi, I'm so-and-so. And I was like, well, then what was her point? Why was she even standing there?
This was funny to me. I actually made note of that. And I said, I wrote in my notes, blonde girl just stands there saying nothing.
She has no voice. She has no purpose.
No. And anytime a ship comes into communication with the Enterprise, they're always like, this is Captain blah, blah of the blah, blah ship.
Or this is Damon so-and-so. Of course.
She literally just stands there for probably 30 seconds staring. And it's like, girl, do you not know how to say hello to people or like communicate?
Right.
Like,
and then my thought was, because they thought maybe perhaps Wyatt would be there, that they were that they wanted her front and center. So when they, the view screen turned on, Wyatt would see her, she would see him, and the music would play and the angels would sing. And then, they would know. That was my only thought of why they did that, because it just makes no sense that like she's standing there just to be pushed aside for her father just to speak. It's like,
what? With his sweet ass like sleeves that are like slit so you could see his arms.
They had some really cool outfits, the Tyrellians, not gonna lie. Everybody had really cool outfits in this episode.
So I think it is funny. I mean, they do say like, yes, we're all infected with the Tyrellian flu. And we're the only ones left. There's only 8 of them on board. Like they're the only ones left. And I wonder if that means like, are you the only 8 Tyrellians left at all, or just the only ones left on the ship? It's not clarified a ton, but it's not that important. But Wyatt does kind of like storm onto the bridge. He comes like sprinting out of the turbo lift, which I think is funny because you're just a passenger that's there for a completely non-related reason. You're there to get married. What business do you have like storming the bridge when a ship comes onto communications? Like,
well, but they did say earlier. So here maybe is why, because he's a doctor, and he and Crusher were talking at the engagement party, or whatever that was. They were talking about, or no, they were talking in the ready room. They were talking about the Tyrellians coming, and he was like, oh my gosh, I've studied everything there is to know about the Tyrellians and their history and their past. And, he was talking to Dr. Crusher saying, would you mind if there was a consult? If the two of us sat and kind of talked about this, because maybe there's a way we can help them. And she was like, I would love that. And she actually said this line where she's like, oh my goodness, it's so nice to have another medical colleague on board, which kind of confirms what I thought from earlier, where we were like, is she the only doctor on this entire ship? I guess she's the only doctor.
Ship's complement of 1,012 people. You're the only doctor.
Crazy. But I think, I don't know, maybe in like the Marines or the Navy or whatever, when they're on those ships, there's not a lot of space for a lot of people. They might not have a ton of doctors either. Maybe they only have like one doctor and 2 nurses. I really don't know. I don't know. But I was like, on this entire ship, she's really the only doctor? That's crazy. And then when Beverly has a medical emergency, we're all screwed. But anyways, so that's why I think he rushed onto the bridge, because he was like, they were talking about it. They want to help these people. It's such a fascinating medical situation. And I think that's maybe why he was like, they're here. Let's see them,
Yeah, that's true. I could. All right. I'll buy that. I'll buy that. So he sees the blonde gal, who I think her name is like Angelique or Angelina or
Ariana.
Angelique. Oh, okay. I totally got that way wrong.
Started with an A. You were on the right alphabet letter.
So he sees Ariana, and then they are like, oh, snaps. Like, you are the person. And then he immediately grabs a bunch of medical supplies and beams over, which means he's not contaminated and can never come back on board.
Which he already knew. And he did it willingly, which is super sweet. And I think it's the perfect occupation for him to be a doctor, because he was destined all along he's going to be the guy who cures the Tyrellian flu or figures it out, or at least saves them or whatever. So he has this sweet little moment where he kind of like kisses Troy goodbye, and he tells his parents, like, take care of yourself. He beams over. And the minute he beams over, the mom is like, come back here at once. And it's like, you can't ever do that. But once he gets on the ship, he sees all of the drawings of himself, which is really sweet. It's like, I thought that was really, really sweet too. Yeah. Like, oh, she's been making sketches just like he's been making sketches. And for some reason they put it up all over the ship.
You know what? They don't have a refrigerator in the 21st century, so there's no place to put up your kids' artwork.
That's true. You don't want to put it on the replicator. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, they're like, I guess the hallway is fine.
The bridge is good.
Yeah. So they end up like sailing away, and Troy is like, I'm really happy for you. Riker is relieved because now he doesn't want Troy, but he doesn't want her to be happy with anybody else because
Of
that's
course.
ridiculously selfish.
Mhm.
But you know what? There's no moral of the story, which I love.
Yeah.
There's no moral. They've
Yep.
kind of moved away from that.
Mhm.
They're still really deep though into the writing method where the climax of the story happens 15 seconds before the credits roll.
Right. Right.
Which I don't love. Like there needs to be time to unpack, but whatever.
Mhm.
It's early season. But there's no moral. But I do like that we get to see the like Riker Troy relationship. I like to see Captain Picard as a human, like when he's trying to carry Luoxana's
Yeah.
trunk.
Yeah.
That cracks me up, and how uncomfortable like she makes him, and he like backs out of the room slowly.
Mhm.
When he beams off the ship,
Mhm.
or when she beams off the ship, she tells him like, your thoughts are so pornographic towards me, and he's just like, ugh.
Yeah, she definitely makes him speechless, but not in any of the good ways.
No. I love that it's used as like a tool of comedy in future episodes when they're like,
Mhm.
my mother's coming on board, and he's like, I have a vacation coming up. I'm
Yep.
gonna take my paid time off right now. See ya.
Yeah. Yep. I love how they do that too. Oh, Captain, you don't want to take vacation? Well, that's great because my mom is coming. Oh, actually, on second
I'll be in
thought.
transporter room too. He is out of there. Yeah. We're not in transport range. Doesn't matter who.
Doesn't matter
I'm
who.
out.
I'm taking a
I'll
shuttle.
take a shuttlecraft.
Yep, got to get out of here. I will take an escape pod. Just point it towards the planet and eject it.
Oh god. Well, see, I'm not the only one who hates Luoxana Troy. If Captain Picard and I are the only two people that dislike her, I still say I'm in good company because
Yeah.
she sucks. She sucks. I don't like pushy people. So
Yeah, but she's a good counterpoint to Troy, I think, to Deanna, right? Because
Yeah.
she's just not like that at all, right? She's not
Mm-mm.
pushy, invasive, digging into your thoughts, reading your thoughts constantly. She literally never reads people's thoughts. She's always like just reading their emotions or whatever. And so she's a good counter to Deanna and a good counter to Mr. Holm.
Yeah, that's true. She is. Do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
None at all.
This is, you know what, listeners, this is going to be us for all of season 1. Just no final thoughts. Let's just keep it pushing to season 2 and things are getting good. All right. So, Shereese, next week we are going to talk about season 1, episode 11, The Big Goodbye. And that one's a fun one because they're in the holodeck for a bunch. Like that's a definite change of pace.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging with us. We'll see you next week.
Talk to you guys soon.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.